I guess without further ado, we can go ahead and just jump into things. Again, if you're unfamiliar with us, we like to start these discussions with a recap of each episode. And we cut that out, hosted on YouTube separately, just for anybody that likes to catch up before the new episode each week. So if you find yourself on that video and you're interested to hear our actual discussion, theories, yada, 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 we'll link to that below. But without further ado, let's jump into this. Episode 28 of Critical Role Campaign 3. The Deathwish run. There we go. So
this one we actually got a Deathwish run. So.
Yeah, that's true. Or wait, no, yeah, okay.
What's the last one called? It doesn't matter.
Sorry. I think it was a race for the prize. I'm looking at it right now. I didn't just remember that, but yeah.
Not one, but two race named episodes.
That's right.
So.
Double the pleasure, double the fun. Anyway, so we pick up with the party basically just doing their final preparations for the Deathwish run, this race that they're participating in. And again, the party has two crawlers, one that they purchased themselves and one that was loaned to them via the Paragon's Call. So first up, who are our drivers? So for the Bell's Hells crawler, which is the one they purchased, we have Ashton driving and Imogen riding shotgun, and they've named it the Red Moon. For the loner crawler, we have Chetney driving, Laudna riding shotgun, and FCG also riding. This doesn't happen yet, but ultimately what happens is FCG serves as the front wheel of this crawler, and their name is the Buckfucket. And Matt basically goes over all the rules of the race mechanically, like how the action economy is going to work, like, yada yada yada, that I won't bog everybody down with here. But he essentially notes that if you have two passengers in Laudna and FCG, you are going to forfeit some mobility, some speed. So it's here when the whole party kind of analyzes and talks and comes up with the plan of FCG serving as the front wheel. So they figure all that out, weld him there, and meanwhile, Imogen and Ashton are in charge of the bomb that the group had commissioned, and they take it in their crawler, place it between them, and the rest of the crew that aren't on a crawler are deciding how best they want to help this mission. Do they want to sabotage? What's their plan going to be? Fern in particular wild shapes into a flying squirrel and tries to sneak on the Paragon's Call crawler, but she's immediately noticed and kicked away, and takes some damage, so poofs back out into her standard form. So we keep preparing. Not much else big happens though, and it's time for the race. So the flag is dropped. Everyone's a go, and this race is broken down into 4 sections. We have the skids, the ravine, the climb, and basically the home stretch. So for the sake of keeping this recap, brief, just gonna hit the highlights. So for the skid section, we basically have everyone starting out and trying to gain ground on each other, and lots of different tricks are coming out of everyone's bag. Laudna uses her scariness, her form of dread, to try to frighten other racers away from her, so they have to legitimately move as far away from her as they can. Imogen is using her telekinetic shove to try to push people off their crawlers, and she's also using command to tell them to stop, to break. All sorts of crazy tricks. But ultimately, the kind of big cool moment that happens in this first section is Imogen gets this awesome "how do you want to do this" moment, where she casts a lightning bolt and is able to hit the driver, the passenger, and the crawler itself, and causes it to just explode and completely remove this one from the race. And more combat ensues. Also with Chetney's crawler, they get caught in this metal net that's really screwing them up, but Chetney goes werewolf and is able to ultimately tear through it.
Cool.
Meanwhile, Orem and Dusk, who are not on crawlers, have been plotting what they're doing, and they've come up with this plan that they are going to try to leap off and board a crawler as it rounds this corner. So Orem does just that, has this awesome acrobatic move where he leaps off with his shield and just straight plummels into the driver of this crawler, and he action surges and is actually successfully able to fully knock the driver off. Dusk follows right behind him, and she manages to knock off the passenger. So
Mhm.
Orm and Dusk have fully taken control of this crawler, effectively removing another one from the race. Um, after this, after all this kind of chaos in this first section, there are only two rival crawlers left, in addition to, the ones driven by our party. And that's actually where we take the break.
Yeah, so coming back from the break, the party's actually like transitioned into like this cavernous region. And there's like a darkness spell out too that I think maybe Imogen casted or someone, which in Imogen's case she can't see in the dark anyway. They end up using FCG as like a headlamp basically, or like headlights on the car.
Yeah.
And so he casts a light on his face, and there's a little bit of a metagame moment where Imogen's like, "I'm gonna hold my action until FCG casts a light," and then he goes to FCG and he's like, "I'm gonna cast light." Um, and so the party's continuing through like this winding cavernous area, and Chetney actually notices that there's bones strewn all over the ground, which is like, why are there bones here? And it's around this time that this large beast basically appears in front of them. Matt describes it as almost like a leopard with scales, but the mini was really cool. The mini actually had like glowing green eyes. That was pretty cool, and looks like a large creature. And it goes by. It's called a Kagaronk, which we shockingly did not get very many names. We shockingly didn't get many jokes about the name, but
Yeah.
the Kagaronk is there. And actually, right before the Kagaronk shows up, Will, you mentioned there were two other opposing crawlers. They actually deal with both of these crawlers. Orem pulls up next to one of them, and he takes like the blue flower petal that they picked up on their way to. I can't think of the place. Basically, where they were going to the heist.
Oh,
They were
yeah.
traveling, and they picked up a couple of different things like in the wild. Well, he picks up this blue flower back then, and he takes it and he uses it and he blows it, and it shoots like this crackling lightning onto the other car. And he gets a cool "how do you want to do this" moment where he basically blows up the other car. Ashton also pulls alongside another car and uses his gravity hammer and basically blows up that car too. Gets his own cool "how do you want to do this" moment. And then the Kagaronk shows up, and Imogen's like, "Wow, I'm glad we destroyed all of our opponents before this showed up." So they're like driving through the caverns as this huge beast is running alongside them, taking swipes at them, tail whipping them, all this kind of stuff. Laudna actually at one point is knocked unconscious from this, and Dusk actually jumps to her car and casts, interestingly enough, lay on hands on her, which is a paladin spell, kind of interesting, to bring her back. And then Orm has this really awesome moment where he throws like these two daggers, one for the head and one for the legs of the Kagaronk, and successfully causes the Kagaronk to collapse and go prone so that the party can then escape. And there's a cool moment like as they're escaping where Dusk like does Eldritch Blast on like the stalactites, and they collapse and kind of like destroy like the path behind them. So they make their way up the climb, and they know they're getting closer to the finish line. And there's a moment where they see like these two individuals on a cliffside who are like pushing boulders off to try to stop them. They also notice there's kind of like this dust storm happening. They also notice figures who are like pulling barriers out into the roadway. And there's sort of this implication that this might even be the All Minds Burn who are trying to sort of like guide them in the direction of the finish line. But then the Kagaronk actually climbs up a cliffside, shows up again. The fight continues as they're just racing through. And then Ashton has this awesome moment where, with his gravity hammer, basically cuts through, like smashes through like the jaw and the head of the Kagaronk and kills it. They're making their way to the bone tree, the final spot, and then Fern, who's kind of just hanging out, realizes that some of these barriers that are getting drug out are actually designed to block the party. They're like these spiky barriers. So she tries to pull one with telekinesis out of the way. It's too heavy. She decides she's going to put the portable hole under one to like take care of it. She rolls a natural one and she falls into the hole. And the party basically, they actually do make their way to the finish line. I think one of their cars like explodes or something and they like roll off or something like that. I can't remember. But they get to the finish line and they are the only survivors. Even Fern's kind of like, wow, no one else survived. This is pretty cool. Ratanish and Adahan show up. They're like, great job. Adahan's like, yeah, you guys will do. Like, basically report to business in the next few days and we'll start like your training. I report to the fortress for, the work that we're going to do together. The party's like on a high. I mean, there's this funny moment where Orum's like riding on Fern's back, being like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and just swapping stories. And there's even a cool moment between Laudna and Dusk, where Laudna kind of doubles back and is like, "Hey, thanks for your offer for a date. Here's why I was so skittish about it. It's because of my, she's kind of like my condition, being basically undead." And Dusk is like, "I'm surprised that like you let that count you out because if you look at your whole group, everyone's like a bunch of weirdos. So I'm surprised like that's the thing that, I don't know." But there is an interesting moment where Imogen sees them talking again and seems to be jealous of what's going on there. So other than that, they're all just getting drinks, kind of relaxing, celebrating. Imahara Joe actually go back to his place to like drop off the crawler for repairs and get FCG off the crawler. And Imahara Joe is basically like, yeah, you were via Matt, you were basically one bad roll away from like having your bottom half like torn off completely. But offers to fix him up. Ashton offers to stay as well. Then the party goes to the undercarriage, I think is what it's called, to celebrate. And there's an interesting moment where Chetney basically pulls up next to Dusk and is like, "Hey, so when Fern's parents get here tomorrow, do you want me to help you do it?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Kill Fern's parents." And she's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he basically is like, "You came here with a photograph of them. I mean, come on, I've been around the block. Like, they're your target, they're your mark." And Dusk is naturally just like, "I don't know what you're talking about." If you've watched up to this episode, we know that she's lying, obviously. So spoilers. But there is an insight check and a deception check. She gets outrolled by him and has to whisper into his ears. And he's like, "Oh yeah, my mistake, whatever." And also, there's an interesting moment between Imogen and Laudna where Imogen does confirm that Adahan is the woman from her dreams and is like, "What's that all about?" And they have no idea. And then there's an interesting moment of Dusk going to Fern being like, "Hey, this is what Chetney said to me. Like, he's crazy. Like, what the heck?" And Fern's like, "Hey, don't worry about him. He was probably messing with you." And it's basically like, "Hey, so we're basically family because we're both from the Feywild." And they spend some time together and they pretty much go to sleep like cuddling each other, like this very like warm relationship. And then there's one last detail of Oram with his observer feat seeing all of this happening,
yeah.
including the conversation with Chetney. And Liam just mentions that he takes note of that. Next morning, the party all reports to Imahara Joe's. They know that Birdie is coming. She does, in fact, come. She pulls up in her own crawler, covered in dust, but recognizable as a fawn, just like Fern. She goes into the shop, tells Imahara Joe basically like, "Hey, yeah, give me whatever you can spare. We don't know quite what it is." And then Fern is like, "Hi, Mom." There's this cool like reunion moment where they're like, "Oh yeah, how long has it been?" And Fern's like, "Yeah, 90 years." While Birdie's like, "Yeah, it's been like 6 years." And and Fern's like, "It's pretty sure it's been 90." And she's like, "No, I'm pretty sure it's been 6 years." So that's kind of an interesting moment. And then Fern's like, "Well, hey, we have your friend Dusk here." And Birdie's like, "I've never met this person. Never met the guy."
Yeah. Who?
And that is when Dusk's tattoo animates off her body, or their body, excuse me, and they transform into their true form, a figure with inky black eyes and gray skin. Dusk is a changeling and assumes their true form, and then grabs Birdie and Fern as Birdie says, "You've led them right towards us." And that is where the episode ends.
Oh,
That's
cliffhanger.
episode 28.
28.
Right?
Yeah.
28 of campaign 3. And if you made it this far and you want to tell us what you thought about the episode and your thoughts, theories, whatever you think about it. Definitely make sure you click the link so you can get to our full discussion. So, all right, here we are, Will.